Okay, well, let's get this started. Hello and a warm welcome from Kigali to all our online participants. Yeah, we are very glad that you decided to dedicate your next 90 minutes to the Basel Convention's PIC procedure, its impact on circular economy and environmentally sound management of e-waste in low and middle income countries. My name is Jana Mandl. I'm advisor at the German Development Cooperation Agency, GIZ, in a project on circular economy and waste management. Yeah, besides advising the German Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development on circular economy and waste-related topics, our GIZ project is also hosting the Prevent Waste Alliance on behalf of the ministry. And this session today, I'm speaking in my role as a working group co-lead of the Prevent Waste Alliance's e-waste working group, which has around 100 members from more than 30 countries working on e-waste related topics. Yeah, our session's topic sounds rather dry and kind of specific, but it fits perfectly into the broader discussions on circular business models, circular supply chains, and circular trade. On Tuesday, there has been a session at the World Circular Economy Forum's main program on circular trade and value chains, which addressed several issues concerning circular trade. And in this session today, we will zoom in on the issues recyclers in low and middle income countries are facing when trying to ship e-waste, which they cannot handle locally, to certified recycling facilities abroad. And fortunately, today we also hear the perspective of the authorities, the African Basel focal points. And yeah, after presenting some potential solutions, we want you to get involved and discuss with you about your experiences, but also possible next steps. Yeah, the Prevent Waste Alliance and the Solving the E-Waste Problem initiative have worked together to raise awareness on that topic. But yeah, before going into their work, I will hand over to Kata and Nicole to briefly introduce STEP and Prevent.
Thank you, Jana. So I'm starting, and good afternoon and welcome to all of the participants to the session. My name is Kata Tisa, and I'm co-managing director of the Solving the E-Waste Problem initiative, STEP initiative. And I would like to briefly introduce our organization and some of our activities. STEP was established 15 years ago as an independent and multi-stakeholder platform, and it had the purpose of addressing all dimensions of the e-waste problem. As you can see, our founding principles, we apply an integrated and science-rooted approach to address the global e-waste challenges and keep the entire life cycle in perspective, including the global supply and process and material flows of electrical and electronic equipment. Our outputs are very much solution-oriented, and we, of course, condemn illegal activities, including the illegal shipments and the illegal reuse and recycling of harmful particles. And we also support social responsibility and try to include safe and eco-efficient reuse and recycling practices into our work. We have a very diverse membership and try to facilitate research, analysis, and dialogue among currently 38 members who are representing business, government, NGOs, international organizations, academia from around the world. Our membership is open to individuals who and also organizations who are addressing the global e-waste issue. And our main means of operation are our working groups. In 2022, we had 4 thematic working groups. And 3 of them, the first 3 you see on the screen, they were a result of our analysis of emerging e-waste issues, which we identified together with our members. The first one, the off-grid solar equipment working group, aims to support the mapping of the e-waste problematic, which results from the decentralized deployment of off-grid solar equipment in mainly low-income economies. And it also aims to initiate dialogue among the stakeholders. And of course, we are aiming to unlock wider change. The pervasive or embedded electronics group is trying to focus on products such as blinking shoes, which include an electronic component, but which are not classified as electronics, and thus they might end up in the wrong waste stream. The group intends to develop proper definitions to this waste stream and tries to assess the dimension of the streams, as well as collect case studies from recyclers and also to propose necessary actions for various stakeholder groups. The third group, the lack of markets working group, is striving to gain a better understanding on the recycling sector in countries that need export certain e-waste elements, and also assess the global recycling markets and complete a directory of the currently existing processing facilities for these critical materials. And we had a project-based working group which focused on EPR regulations and had a thought paper delivered for the Global E-Waste Day this October. And we also have a regional, very active working group in Latin America, which my colleague Daniel will soon present on, and he's the focal point for the working group leading its activities. As Jana mentioned, we also have the joint Prevent Step e-waste working group, and you will hear more about this throughout this session. Now, a quick slide selecting some of our outputs and activities from the recent times. We have contributed to the e-waste discussion with several own and joint publications. And the most recent ones are focusing on transboundary waste, transboundary movement of waste globally and also within the Latin American countries. And this is the thought paper on the left below corner you see from the working group on EPR. And STEP also did projects such as the Person in the Port project, which has been completed by STEP members, the Basel Convention centers in Africa, and the UNU. And we also received support from EPA, the US EPA, and GIZ. And the project report presented the methods and the results of inspection of containers and vehicles for used IE imports into Nigeria. And we try to keep our members engaged and do regular webinar series in a wide range of topics. And if you're more interested in our activities and materials, they're all publicly available on our website. And with this, I don't want to take up more time and leave more sufficient time for the session. And I would like to thank you for your attention. And as said, you can check out our website or contact me directly if you have any further questions. So thank you. I'm handing it back to Jana, or to Nicole, sorry.
Yeah, I think I'll take over directly. So I'll very, very briefly present the Prevent Waste Alliance as a whole, since, this was a cooperation between STEP and the Prevent. So also welcome from my side. Next slide. Yeah, so in general, the Prevent is much younger than STEP. We're only nearly 4 years old now. We're an international platform for technical exchange on circular economy. And this means that we don't only look at the topic of electronic waste, which is one of our 3 main topics, but also other waste streams such as plastics and organic waste. So far, we're still 100% financed by the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, the BMZ, but of course count with very valuable voluntary in-kind contributions of our members. The Prevent currently has about 380 member organizations, most of them coming from the private sector, and still the majority of our members are from the Northern Hemisphere, but we are slowly but surely getting an increasing number from low and middle income countries, because low and middle income countries are also the main area that geographical focus that we have as Prevent Waste Alliance. Next slide. So a very brief overview of the different formats on how you can engage if you are a member of the Prevent Waste Alliance. So we have the working groups. Jana already mentioned the working group on electronic waste. Then we have one on plastics, and a third one, which is currently still called Framework Conditions, and is focusing on the waste stream of organic waste. And the last General Assembly also decided that this working group will change the name to organic waste. yeah, in these working group sessions, we really try to focus on very topic-specific and technical exchanges. So it's not so much on policy, yeah, on like a very high political level, but really on a technical exchange level. And as a result of some of the working group discussions, we elaborate studies and tools and also develop kind of solutions or projects. Then we have another format called the matchmaking series. The purpose, I think, is in the name already, is to connect members amongst each other, to introduce them to each other, and then build partnerships based on that. Then we have had pilot projects which were implemented in 15 countries and innovation programs as our more implementing side. So we don't only basically do the talking, but also the implementation on the ground. And for further networking, we have an internal members area called the Prevent Hub, which also includes an international project database. So with that, I would like to hand over back to Jana so that we can really dive into the topic.
Yeah. Thank you, Nicole. Yeah, I will go on with some background information which could be useful for our discussion later on. Yeah, well, the global trading system was developed amid a linear economy, and even today, circular economy concepts are still largely absent from trade policy. But the benefits and the urgency of the transition to a circular economy are now becoming more than clear. And electronics, yeah, offer an excellent test case for action. Yeah, because electronics are on an upward growth trend, especially in fast-growing emerging economies. In fact, it's the fastest growing waste stream worldwide. Yet, e-waste disposal is not very well managed, causing negative impacts on human health and the planet. Yeah, globally, only 17% of the e-waste is collected and properly managed. In Africa, it's actually only 0.9%. And yeah, many actions can be taken to render electronics more circular. This includes reuse, repair, and refurbishment. And as a last resort, also recycling. Because if done properly, it can be a source of job creation and resource conservation. And yeah, local recycling should therefore be supported and preferred over exporting waste. However, in many countries, there are no suitable recycling facilities for some types of e-waste, such as lithium-ion batteries. And especially in island and smaller countries, volumes are too small to reach minimum economies of scale to make investment in such facilities feasible, making then export the only realistic option for environmentally sound management and recycling. Yeah, unfortunately, this necessary transboundary movements are currently not functioning well. And this is not only risking the environment and health of people, but also the existence of responsible recyclers in low and middle income countries. Next slide, please. Yeah, because let me go one step back. What is the Basel Convention about? Entering into force in 1992, the Basel Convention originally aimed to prohibit the dumping of hazardous and other wastes in low and middle income countries. It should further promote environmentally sound management and provide a regulatory system to control transboundary waste movements. To support this, the prior informed consent procedure was established. This is a procedure between parties of the Basel Convention and transit states. So if you want to export hazardous waste, you require the consent of a state of import and any states of transit. So you also need a contract between the exporter and the disposer, which must specify the environmentally sound management. In 2019, the Benn Amendment, which was an OECD decision, was passed that extended the convention prohibiting all exports of hazardous waste from OECD to non-OECD countries. And that was actually a big step for more environmental justice. Even though there are continued reports of e-waste being illegally exported from OECD countries under false declaration, the Basel Convention has reduced export of hazardous waste to low and middle income countries. And with 96% of United Nations countries having ratified it, it has become one of the most respected environmental treaties. But, however, the Basel Convention was adopted with a linear mindset, focusing on restricting risky trade. And the main purpose of the convention, combating the dumping of hazardous waste into low and middle-income countries, is indisputable. But there are concerns that the current rules and the notification procedure of the convention are actually hindering environmentally sound management of hazardous waste and the transition to a circular economy. Next slide, please. So what does it mean for environmentally sound management of e-waste? Under the Basel Convention, e-waste is classified as hazardous with some exceptions, but in 2 years' time, all e-waste fractions that are exported will require PIC approvals. That was decided at the Basel COP in April. Having said that, you can still export used goods. That this is allowed under the Basel Convention. But the poor implementation of the PIC procedure in many countries ultimately leads to large volumes of informal treatment or just falsely declared exports, while recyclers, which are attempting to apply sustainable processes, are faced with major administrative and cost burdens. So the convention, which was originally meant to protect low and middle income countries, is also harming those countries, and especially recyclers who are trying to do the right thing by exporting waste to facilities which can deal with it. And even though this is not always economically viable for them. Next slide. With the Prevent Waste Alliance, we've been working a lot with recyclers all over the world, and we figured out that the PIC procedure is a real pain point for many compliant recyclers. So we decided to join forces with the STEP initiative, and we built a loose coalition of willing members that want to work on that topic. At this point, also big thanks to the Prevent and STEP members who have really put a lot of time and effort on writing a joint discussion paper on their practical experiences with the Basel Convention. This also includes my colleague Daniel, who's currently on a sabbatical. This discussion paper might be also viewed, which can be, by the way, downloaded at our Prevent website. The discussion paper might be viewed as criticizing, but the working group believes it is necessary to talk transparently about the challenges faced by practitioners, in the hope that this can become the start of a dialogue that can support all actors to better implement and comply with the Basel Convention. Besides gathering experiences, the paper also proposes solutions and sets the stage to develop follow-up activities with parties to improve the implementation of the PIC procedure. Next slide. So what are the challenges linked to the PIC procedure that have been identified? The implementation of the Basel Convention differs substantially between countries, depending upon available resources and capacity of local authorities. Some countries have signed up and ratified the Basel Convention, but have not transposed it into national law yet. Often there's a lack of practical experiences or awareness in conducting transboundary movement in competent authorities, but also by exporters and customs. And even competent authorities have often no experiences in processing the notification and movement documents in practice. There's a lack of awareness and enforcement in customs, which can lead to penalties for compliant Basel shipments, while undeclared hazardous waste shipments pass by unnoticed. And then we have also different national implementations around the world, so there's no harmonized system. We have differing definitions, tariff codes, administrative processes, and documentation needs between countries. In order to get a shipment done, you need the approval of the sending and receiving country and the approval of all transit countries. But sometimes the transit nations never respond. This makes some sea carriers reluctant to take hazardous waste on board because they fear the risk of vessels being blocked in transit countries. And another risk for shipping companies is the potential danger of this kind of waste such as fire risk of lithium-ion batteries. And then there are high costs involved with the PIC procedure. So there are cases where procedures doubled the cost of the shipping. The highest single notification was 220,000 euros, actually. And yeah, finally, the paperwork can be very time consuming, and notifications can take from several months to even years. And yeah, well, the longest process reported was 5 years. And this is really not a business process anymore. All this, yeah, all this is leading to challenges complying with the provisions of the Basel Convention in practice. So what are the implications of this? Atta, next. Yeah, you're already there. Great. The implications are illicit trade is in many countries. It's easier to do it illegally than legally. And this leaves recyclers with difficult decisions on managing hazardous waste. So you either simply avoid managing hazardous waste, you store hazardous waste until you can export it. That's bearing a huge fire risk, especially for lithium-ion batteries. You can give it to the informal sector or actors not following standards who might just dump the waste. Or you export fractions falsely declared or used goods as falsely declared as used goods, or you just export it undeclared. So to some extent, you can therefore conclude that the current implementation of the Basel Convention is hindering environmentally sound management, as well as the creation of a level playing field, which is disadvantaging those recyclers who comply with trade rules. And the Prevent STEP working group therefore sees an urgent need to improve implementation and compliance, as well as innovate within the existing system for both recyclers and authorities. So before presenting some solutions, and going into discussion with you, let's hear some practical voices. Yeah, Daniel, are you here? Daniel?
Daniel, which Daniel?
Daniel Ott, yes.
yes, I'm here, sorry. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm assuming you want me to quickly present.
Yeah. Do you have a presentation? Probably.
Yes, sorry for that. I didn't get your. But I'll quickly put up my slides here just to give you a quick overview here on what we did in Latin America. My name is Daniel Ott. I'm the manager Latin America with RLG. RLG is a company, or Reverse Logistics Group is a company that implements take-back and compliance systems all over the globe. And I have the honor, let's say, to be a focal point for Latin America for STEP and have been for quite a while. So this is somehow turned into that active working group on Latin America, as Kata already mentioned, which was launched in 2018 and has been a group basically for the STEP members interested in Latin America or present in Latin America. Just to collaborate on development of tangible products that contribute to priority issues in the region, basically, and bring some existing knowledge and expertise from STEP members to we stakeholders in Latin American countries, but also with the aim to facilitate communication between STEP members interested in the region. So that's basically where we're coming from. You can see the current members here with the EMPA, DRSET, GISET, ITU, RELAC, which is an NGO working in Latin America on this topic, RLG, UNIDO, We Forum, CERI, that's the home of the R2 standard, and that Ecologicon, just to mention a few of them. So at the beginning of 2021, we decided that we wanted to make our contribution, let's say, to a very complicated topic, as you just saw, and chose the Transboundary movements of we in Latin America as our main project for that year. Basically took us 2 years to work on it. You can see a quick outline. What we did, we just wanted to give the different stakeholders that are involved, or the main stakeholders, we wanted to give them a voice. they're not really part of our group. So we scheduled different webinars where we invited recyclers from the region and also government representatives just to discuss at first, let's say, the challenges, and then try to come up with some simple conclusions and also, let's say, a few simple suggestions. You know, it's as you just saw, and as Jana just mentioned, it's a highly complex topic. I think most of the challenges that you showed there, we also had them in our discussions. Sorry, just quickly here, we were able to capture, let's say, the viewpoints of 19 recyclers and 13 countries out of the 15 that we invited to the process. So we got a good overview, I'd say, of the challenges that the different stakeholders face. And it was interesting to see how open, let's say, both groups were. So we had in total 3 events, one only with recyclers, where there was obviously a lot of complaining about government representatives. Then we had also an event with the government representatives where there were also some critical voices about the practices that are implemented by the recyclers. And then we brought them together also in a joint panel discussion on the challenges that we saw during these events, and also during a series of questionnaires that we did for both groups. To the result that Kata already showed, that we now have a publication of a Spanish version. We're currently working on an English one. Just to we wanted, normally we always focused in step on the English version first. We wanted to turn this around, but now we're still working on the English one, which will be available, I assume, at the beginning of next year, and can be obviously consulted by all of you that are not fluent in Spanish. The Spanish version is already available on the STEP website. So just very quickly, you know this graph, and sorry, it's in Spanish. That's from the Spanish version. As I said, we were just trying to kind of summarize the main challenges presented by both groups, and then make a couple of conclusions. The challenges to a certain extent even match, so that was interesting to see. And again, sorry that this is in Spanish, but you will see that in the English version then when available. You know, it's about duration of the permit, clarity of the process, availability of information, deadlines, categorization of the different fractions, and so on. So that's the kind of challenges that we saw. And then we tried to just make some very simple suggestions. This number relates to the, to the part of the PIC process that you can see here on the graph. So yeah, suggestions like working on the availability of centralized information, of final destination and exports in some cases, or standardization of the waste categories, because typically on a local level there's just not enough information on and clarity about what needs to be declared, how, and under what tariff code, and these kind of elements. There was a suggestion on a WE information center or an operational platform to share experiences. And then also, I think, and even the government representatives were in sync that there is more strengthening and training of the environmental and custom authorities needed. So not rocket science, right? Just simple things that can contribute towards improving the current situation with that is, I would say, in general, quite a mess. And and there's definitely a need for more agile and efficient process. That's clear, and that's been confirmed also, let's say, from a Latin America viewpoint. There's also some initiatives, that tend towards developing regional solution. That's obviously tricky because there's very few OECD countries in Latin America, so that would go against, let's say, the Basel criteria. But generally, there were some calls for global platform and the automation of processes, kind of a centralized IT platform where you can process your requests and get faster answers and involve all the stakeholders, a recategorization of the fractions, and then also, as I said, improvement in the region generally to find local and more local and more regional solutions that would make probably also exports easier between neighboring countries and would avoid to have a lot of intermediary countries involved. What was really interesting to see, and I don't have that on the slides, but for the first time, just want to mention that because for the first time, I think a lot of recyclers from different countries in Latin America were in the same space. They normally tend to meet in a conference called eScrap in the US, but they don't really have a lot of communication between themselves and as part of the project and as basically one of the unintended results of our recycler workshop, they created this regional group of recyclers to exchange on not only on export issues, obviously, but also generally, and that we understand that this working group has been quite active for the last year and a half, and they will continue to meet and exchange. So an interesting side effect of this process. So as I said, we just like the English version to be published. We then also from STEP side would like to make do a final webinar on the results in English. We had one just a couple of weeks ago on the Spanish version. And then we're still trying to define our next priority topic for the Latin America Working Group, which might also be a follow-up topic now of this of this interesting assessment, let's say, of the situation in the region. So thank you very much for having me and for letting me share quickly a couple of ideas and experiences of that project.
Yeah, thank you very much, Daniel, for taking your time. Unfortunately, you have to run off, right? You can't participate in our discussion later on.
Yeah, I will stay on a little bit longer. Maybe if I can contribute, then I'm happy to do so. If I have to jump off, I'll obviously have to do that first.
Okay.
Thanks.
So if there are immediate questions towards Daniel, you can come up now. Otherwise, we'll continue with Reinhard. Then you can go ahead, Reinhard.
Great, thank you, Jana. So I'm Reinhard Smit. I'm a co-founder of Closing the Loop, a Dutch social enterprise for business company that collects electronic waste in African countries and ships them for proper recycling wherever that needs to go, if it can't be recycled locally. I'm going to share some information about my personal experience as a company with the PIC procedure, maybe following Daniel's overview of various companies, going specifically to one company and what we've experienced. We have by now had about 8, I think, prior informed consent procedures completed. We've exported waste from 6 different African countries with a lot of transit countries. So we feel like there's a lot of experience we've gained along the way in this process. And I just want to focus specifically on what are the things that we've noticed, and then end up, of course, with what are ways that we think we can do to make this easier. I'm just checking that my slides are working. Yes. I'm going to start quickly. Other than what Basel was created for, that Jana talked about in the beginning, it's also why is it important that the Basel process is followed? First of all, of course, it's a legal requirement. If you're shipping waste, then it's a legal requirement to follow the Basel process. But in terms of circular economy and looking at the future, it's also important that these shipments that are happening become more transparent, that we know what sort of shipments are happening, where they're coming from, what is in there, who's processing them, what is the result of the process, because that transparency creates business models, creates a business case, for example, for more efficiency, better local recycling. It also builds capacity. If more people start following the process, it builds capacity in terms of understanding what sort of wastes are out there and what are the challenges that you get when dealing with this waste. And finally, Jana also mentioned this part already, that if you don't follow the process, misdeclarations and things like that can lead to hazards and accidents, of which there are many examples already. What currently is being done wrong, and I have to emphasize here that there are a lot of companies that are not following, organizations that are not following the Basel process, but that are in a way doing the right thing. They are making sure that waste that would otherwise be dumped or traded in bad ways are properly exported to countries and facilities that can treat them. They're simply not following the Basel process. So it is better than maybe the full alternative, but there's also a lot of organizations that simply choose not to do so. So on the one hand, you have people that simply ignore the process. On the other hand, there's people and organizations that do parts of it, and very often just the best they can. For example, skipping the steps, getting a permit to export, but never talking to the receiving country, or the other way around, only getting approval from the receiving country, not from the transit countries or from the exporting country. And then finally, a lot of waste shipments are being misdeclared for various reasons. Some of these reasons being shipping legislation and problems with documentation. So if you don't follow the process, what we do is if you decide to follow the process as an organization, you think I'm going to follow this Basel process. We've seen two pictures of how it works already. Those are extremely complicated diagrams, and that's already a simplified process of how the PIC procedure works. The issues from the exporting states that you have, the focal points and the competent authorities, you find complications when dealing with that as an exporting entity. You have issues transiting when all the ports that the ships pass through, even if containers are not offloaded. There's also lots of issues in destination states, even in the OECD countries that receive the waste and have the facilities to process them. There's also a lot of issues. And then finally, also, of course, also the transport issues that I'll get onto. So starting with export, each state basically creates their own interpretation of the Basel process, whether it's the interpretation of the rules themselves or the actual implementation. How do you follow them? Inspections are quite expensive, often badly documented, and there's a trust and knowledge issues from the exporting states very often about the importing states. If you're, for example, shipping some types of electronic waste, that technology does not exist at all in the exporting countries, and often the knowledge isn't there either. So, for example, you run into issues such simply underfunded focal points that just don't have the funds to support many permits. So it takes very long to get a permit, or inspections that happen when the inspectors are not trained enough to understand what they're inspecting. So they would inspect the facility, but never even look at the cargo. And some of these capacity issues could be that many focal points have one single point of contact, one person that's allowed to put a signature to move the process forward. And then that could take 2 months before that person is able to do so, to give a signature, and then you're 2 months further. And of course, as a private enterprise, 2 months is a very long time financially. So this is some of the challenges we have from the exporting states. When we're looking at transit states, every single state that the ship stops on the way, there's a lot of challenges there too. First and foremost being that the transit states can never be 100% guaranteed on the shipping line process. I'll get into that a little bit more further. There's language barriers. If you, for example, transport out of Nigeria and a ship passes through Senegal and Morocco, you need to translate it into French. If it goes past Spain, you have Spanish. So there's a lot of challenges there. And finally, same challenges that you very often have in the global south is capacity, whether it's financial resources or simply knowledge capacity that can slow things down quite a lot. The examples, one of the examples of transit states changing, there was a ship, for example, that passed through Hong Kong. It wasn't supposed to dock, but because something went wrong, the ship had to dock for emergency reasons. And suddenly all the hazardous shipments on that ship became illegal because Hong Kong was not part of the transit states in the notification. This actually resulted in a big financial issue. So very practical things that can go wrong. And finally, the importing states, I'm speaking of many European states at the moment, they also have a lack of knowledge of what's happening in the global south. they're very used to their own environment, what's happening transporting between European countries. But when you're exporting waste from, for example, from African countries, the reality on the ground, there's a lack of knowledge in these competent authorities. And that results in very bad communication from the exporting party, or misunderstanding simply in terms of where the waste is coming from, how the waste was generated, etc. This also is translated into checklists and processes that cannot be followed, because these checklists and processes are geared towards what they are used to in Europe, for example. And finally, also the means of communication is often not compatible. Things like using digital signatures, forcing organizations to use the same email address that's listed on the Basel website. And when an email is sent from a different email address because there's internet issues or something like that, then the email is simply not accepted. Or if you send a DHL package and the sender is not the competent authority, but someone else, then the package is sometimes not accepted, even though it could be a standard process in some countries that the notifier, the exporting company, is the one who sends the DHL package and not the competent authority. Small examples that can create massive delays in shipments. And then finally, the transport part is also quite a big hurdle, because shipping lines themselves have to obviously follow these rules as well. So they have a lot of challenges in being able to do so, for one reason, because the Basel Convention has been around for quite a while, when shipping worked quite differently as well. It's no longer one ship for one company stopping at one country. There are thousands of containers on one ship, and the Basel process doesn't really match that reality. So shipping lines can never guarantee the transit countries. They simply cannot do that, because weather changes or anything else can create an extra transit stop. So if you don't have that transit country on your permit, you have to restart. And we actually had that situation where we spent 14 months waiting for a permit, and as soon as the permit was accepted, the shipping line changed their route and the permit was useless. So we had to start the whole process again. In addition, all these rules create a lot of overhead costs for paperwork and administration, which raises the cost for exporters. I believe the 20,000 that was mentioned earlier in terms of costs, that's simply for the permit, never mind what the extra costs you have for logistics that become higher simply because you have to follow this process. And finally, there's also the insurance issues. Carriers have to show that they have the right insurance for these shipments, and they often do. But these insurance papers then also have to be in a couple of different languages and also have to be available, which they're often not. So yeah, what are some possible solutions that we think, and Jana will go into a bit more detail on this later. We think collaboration is necessary beyond the normal Basel process. Companies, organizations, and countries need to work together on this. More organizations need to follow the process, because that creates more capacity as well. We need clarity of each individual state of what the requirements are, and then we need to compare those requirements and see where the gaps are. And finally, we need to work with real-world cases, not hypotheticals, when we're developing capacity on this topic. So thank you very much. I'll hand back to Jana for the next introduction. Thank you.
Well, is Percy there?
Yes.
Yes, he is. Great. Then I will hand over to Percy, who is the Basel Convention focal point for Africa.
Yeah, thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Percy, are you
there? Turn my camera on. Yeah, I'm
because
here.
Right now we've dealt with the recycler's perspective, and now we want some authorities' perspective to come in.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I was trying to put on the camera, but it wouldn't come on. Thank you. I have listened to Reinhard, and I understand his point of view as a businessman who is doing importing and exporting within the region. And I want to speak from the perspective of some of the experiences of some of the focal points in the West African region. I guess that's the region where Smith has been doing his business. One difficulty that any one trying to carry out transboundary movement is likely to face in that region, of course, is the significant differences as you move from one country to the other, making you have to battle with requirements that differ from one country to another. These arise essentially from differences, first in the composition of the authorities that need to grant you permits for import and export. In some countries, you will find that the focal points and the competent authority are one unique entity in one ministry. In some others, the focal point is in one ministry, the competent authority is in another. And sometimes the entities that need to give you the permit may be just one particular individual who is the competent authority who receives a recommendation from the focal point that has carried out due diligence, while in others, you may have to have a committee of several people in different ministries and so on that needs to come together to deliberate on a recommendation and so on. So some of these differences make it more difficult for those who have to carry out transboundary movement. But whatever the difference is, one obvious problem that you're likely to face is that in the West African region, the very word waste quickly raises some suspicion because of the long-standing experiences, unpleasant experiences, such as the classical cases of dumping in cocoa, in Abidjan. We also know that in Tunisia recently. So there's not been much transparency sometimes on the part of those who are either exporting or importing. So on the basis of that, the due diligence process is sometimes more rigorous than you would imagine. We will, of course, be listening very soon to some of the actual focal points, but my interaction with them has showed that they tend to believe that they need to carry out due diligence very rigorously, sometimes because if there's any problem arising from they not having done this, they could lose their jobs as a result of liabilities that could arise from problems of inadequate documentation or waste generators and importers or exporters denying ownerships and so on. So sometimes out of a tendency to want to be very careful, they tend to take longer than is necessary. I appreciate that this is not what it should be. The countries themselves appreciate that they are supposed to facilitate trade, but they realize that their experiences are better guides to determining what cares they need to put in place in terms of caution to prevent illegal dumping or illegal traffic. In some of the countries, we're talking about e-waste, for example. In some of the countries like Nigeria, e-waste importation is completely banned. Yet we have lots and lots of e-waste all over the place, showing you that, and most of these come from Europe and the Americas and so on. So they tend to be a little bit not too certain if people are trying to play smart on them, okay? But essentially, this has been the core problem with regards to, and then there's this big bureaucracy that after the focal point has done his due diligence, he has to still make a recommendation to a higher authority who might take his time in determining, looking at all the facts again, and then taking the final decision on granting or denying the permit. And as we go along with these import-export businesses, we will gradually beginning to have to deal with wastes of the types that we have not dealt with previously, like the question of lithium-ion batteries is a new kind of waste for us in West Africa. Only very few cases of transboundary movement of seeking permits for such wastes. So such will tend to create certain more delays than previous shipments as people try to get used to the the characteristics of such waste and who are competent to import or export them. The Basel Convention itself, while the motive is okay with respect to the PIC procedure, may need from time to time to be reviewed to simplify the process so as to sort of encourage, because what some of the problems we are encountering, or some of the issues we're encountering now, are not people trying to ship waste to us in West Africa, but people trying to ship out waste, which is not something we wouldn't mind. So the convention will also have to make it easy for people to carry out export of trade from our region. Since they will have permits, perhaps sometimes those permits can pass through a more simplified process. But as Smith has pointed out earlier, there's a gross lack of capacity, which needs to be corrected on the part of some of the focal points. Capacity in terms of the financial wherewithal to carry out some of their due diligence function, as well as the technical know-how on some of the new waste streams. I think I'll just stop at this point and allow some of the actual focal points to make their own comments. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Percy. I know that you have to leave again, so maybe can I ask you just one question before you leave, and before we hand over back to Jana?
All right.
If you can give one suggestion, and we have all these organizations online, but we also have all these organizations that have been working on this PIC procedure and on ways that we can facilitate the legal trade of waste from regions such as Africa. What would the one suggestion be that these organizations work on in order to make that process easier?
I do think first there should be a network of focal points. The focal points, apart from this issue of your difficulties with exporting waste from our region, have many other reasons to network among each other, to learn from each other, and to find ways of also doing what some of them would like to do, prevent waste from being dumped. I think if that network exists, it should be possible for people like you to tap into that network, and we can organize webinars and training sessions, essentially hear their points of view, get them to cooperate, to work with people who are interested in legal transboundary movements, and see how we can sort of knock off some of the rough edges to smoothing out business for people like it. That's one very important thing, which we are trying to actually do within the. But I'm sure the focal points can chip off some of these bureaucracies if they have a collective will within the sub-region to work together and make presentations to their bosses.
Thank you very much, Percy, for that. Shall I pass back to you, Jana?
I think there was another question from the audience. Was there?
Okay.
Nicole,
yeah, I can take that before leaving.
Yeah. Okay, there was a hand, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I saw a hand go up.
Yeah, go ahead.
Off.
Right. Okay. So I wanted to ask. Sorry, this is Fred Mills, GNZ Ghana. I wanted to ask, one of the recommendations from the earlier presenters was to the extent of having or digitizing or having a central digitized platform for exchange of the PIC. I don't know, has there been any activity at the world stage on this? Has anything moved on having that central maybe platform for exchange of digitized documents? Thank you. I'm done.
Percy? I think we may have lost Percy.
Frederick, is your hand? Is that a new hand? No, that's the old one.
I lowered it. Sorry.
I think maybe you can take that question, Jana, if Percy is not there, or we can get to that a bit later in the next part of the program.
Okay. Yeah, well, then I will just go really brief into the solution part. So we have heard a lot of challenges linked to the Basel PIC procedure, but we want to look ahead and want to contribute to solutions. So in the run up to the Basel Convention COP in April this year, the Prevent STEP working group joined forces and went into discussion with other actors like the World Economic Forum, Global Alliance for Trade Facilitation, the European Electronics Recycler Association, and the Circular Electronics Partnership. And together we hosted a side event at the Basel COP and tried to highlight potential solutions and what could be done to improve the current implementation of the PIC procedure on the ground. Yeah, and at the Basel COP, we presented projects which already did substantial work on that. Amongst them, an EU fast-track project which brought together all relevant authorities to make approval as quick as possible. Or another project working on digital solutions for PIC procedure. And here, interestingly, they were gathering experiences from other sectors which already use digital platforms. So how can we scale those solutions and develop a more streamlined process and approach? Yeah, Daniel Reinhardt, but also Percy already presented some thoughts, and we also want to hear your suggestions in a few minutes. But to kickstart our discussions, let me share some thoughts. So together with alliances I just mentioned, we are suggesting to do legally compliant real-world shipments. So pilots to raise awareness, build capacity, and trial solutions. And the EU Fast Track project could, for example, be replicated in such pilot shipments. So pilots could comprise fast track arrangements to speed up waste clearance for responsible recyclers. So national competent authorities could make bilateral agreements between each other. And those kind of agreements already exist for some OECD economies, and discussions are also ongoing for intra-EU options. So such fast-track systems could also be piloted for trade flows from OECD to non-OECD countries or in between non-OECD countries. That's a suggestion. And then, yeah, on the setting up of digital platforms could also be worked on, but that might not be the starting point for every country. So throughout those pilots, relevant information of the practical implementation for improvement should be compiled. And furthermore, there should also be accompanied by capacity building measures. Yeah, beyond that, I'm sure there are many other ideas, and I would be happy if you could bring them into our discussions now. I also saw some representatives of the World Economic Forum and Circular Electronic Partnerships. They're also here in the call today, and they can certainly also contribute some further ideas. And yeah, for moderating the discussion, I will hand over to Nicole. And maybe Percy is already back. Is he? No, he's gone. Okay.
Thanks, Jana. So actually in the chat, we already have one comment by, again, the Basel Convention Secretariat. Tatiana, if you're still in the call, maybe you just want to point out what you have written in the chat, because I don't know if everybody can actually see the chat. And it is a great response from the Basel Convention on the critiques basically that have been like shared here today on the PIC procedure. So the floor is yours, Tatiana.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you very much for giving me the floor. And it's good also to hear the feedback from the various stakeholders. I would like to point out several elements which I think could be useful for this discussion. And I think the most important one is that this new work stream, which started just recently on the improvement of the PIC procedure. And the way it actually came about is that at the last COP, there was a proposal to amend the convention coming from the Russian Federation, and specifically to give the specific deadline for the state of import to provide the consent or not consent. And so this proposal received a lot of support from parties because, as I think also as you mentioned, that the whole PIC procedure can take a long time. Sometimes it's a really issue of the fact that focal points have changed and that was not notified. So then we have out-of-dated information and so on. But sometimes it also could be other reasons. But so that triggered the discussions at the COP, and that led to the fact that we need to look at parties need to look at the bigger picture, to the whole procedure, not only this one aspect. And this is how this work is started. And I think what is really important is that now we are collecting actually feedback and comments on challenges, on experience, but also on good practices, and also looking specifically for developing countries, but of course all other countries as well. So, and I think I noted that you did collected already some. You have the feedback like that. So I would really like to invite you to provide these comments. There is a process, and I can. You can send it to me if the simplest way, and I can explain exactly how to submit the comments. So that will be very, very valuable, I think, feedback and experience from your side, from the side of the private sector. Now and I'm not sure that I heard you mention that, but I just wanted to make sure that everyone is aware about the new amendments to the convention, specifically related to e-waste. So that was also adopted a few months ago, but they will become effective only from 2025. So to give parties time to prepare for that. So what really it means that now, as you mentioned that yes, PIC procedure applies to hazardous waste, but also to other waste, and and following the proposal from Ghana and Switzerland, and that proposal was accepted. Now all e-waste are grouped into two categories: hazardous waste and other waste, which is Annex 2, which is basically, it's not necessarily hazardous, but it requires special consideration, meaning that all e-waste will be subject to the PIC procedure, but not used equipment, right? So that is outside of the scope of the Basel. And then, I think also just to make sure that there is also the convention has a quite strong provision about what happened when the PIC procedure is not followed, and then you have various, let's say, situations. For example, if there is a consent was not received, and then it was received with the using falsification, so on. So the convention actually makes this type of the illegal traffic as a criminal offense. So it doesn't mean that in all cases it will be criminal offense, but in some countries it can be administrative fine and so on. But this is just to keep in mind that it also depends how parties enforce it, and some parties are very active, and other parties are less active. And it's true that it's also a complex issue, but there is this side of the story as well. Not only promoting trade, but also what happens when there is illegal traffic. And then finally, insurance guarantees. I think we have also guidance document if you are interested in that, about experiences, but this is not specifically required by the convention. This is I wanted to to mention, but convention refers to the national legislation, and then of course that you have to follow the national legislation based which parties are concerned. And then finally, I think I hear a lot of let's say maybe interest and support for the digitalization of the PIC procedure, and I think we hear it also a lot. And there is already process started, but you can imagine that for 190 parties, it could be quite a complex exercise. So, but there is a group which look at different experiences, and now the next step will be to come up with some recommendations how to go about it. But also, as a secretariat, we're in touch with UNCTAD for ICCUDA. We also discuss with WCO for the single window, but this is ongoing process. But again, there is always a possibility for stakeholders, not governments, but private sectors and others, to provide contribution and to be part of the of this. You know, when it comes to the decisions, yes, it's only parties who make decisions. But I think, you know, during these processes, there are opportunities for input from others, not only parties. So yes, so this is what I want to mention. Thank you.
Okay, sorry, there I was muted. So thanks a lot, Tatiana, for elaborating on that and also giving the audience basically the opportunity to hand in their further comments and recommendations for the amendment of the PIC process, and also for answering Frederick's question on the digital platform and the work that that is ongoing in this direction. Is there anybody else who would like to answer Frederick's question in the panel or in the group, in the room, on the digitally the digital initiatives to facilitate the PIC procedure? Otherwise, Pojen, would you like to just unmute yourself and share your question? Otherwise, I can read it if you have difficulties with unmuting yourself. Maybe you can introduce yourself too.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Pojen. I'm the program intern with PACE, Platform for Accelerating the Circular Economy. So yeah, I read that from OECD and EU waste shipment regulation, there's already some measures to improve this process of PIC. I'm just wondering if it already has some effect on ground, and what still need to be improved from this, because yeah, what would be the objective for this procedure? Thank you.
And maybe take the part from the non-EU. Is that okay? Yeah. So I don't know about specifically in EU, but I have the tacit consent idea is manifested. It exists, but we find that a lot of companies, or not companies, a lot of countries and states are not using it yet. There's still a lot of just simply because it's in the convention as a possibility doesn't mean that it gets implemented yet. So at least from our perspective, and also moving goods transboundary between European states when it's coming from Africa, that tacit consent, some countries have done it. Spain, for example, is relatively easy, but then for a lot of other countries, even if it's a transit, that tacit consent has not had any effect yet. And also from the pre-consented facilities situation, there's that would definitely help. If something is pre-consented, it should theoretically be faster. But what we've also noticed is that even if it's a pre-consented facilities, if you're exporting from outside the OECD, there's again that knowledge gap between what does that mean. I think Percy mentioned this already, that there is a mistrust and sometimes just a knowledge gap between what does it mean if they're pre-consented in Belgium, for example. It could be that one of the African countries doesn't fully understand what that is, or wants to do their own due diligence on this. So I don't know if anyone's online that knows about the intra-EU, but coming from outside, this has not had an effect yet. Although people are starting to talk about it more, so hopefully there will be more positive effect of that in the near future.
Thanks, Reinhard. I hope that at least partially answers your question. Anybody maybe from the intra-EU perspective? Or any further questions or comments? You can also share your experience, either positive or challenges that you've faced while implementing the PIC process. Jelena, just feel free to unmute yourself.
Yes, hi. My name is Jelena Nešić. I'm here on behalf of the Springlob cooperative from the Netherlands. I myself am based in Serbia, and we are a group of waste management and circular economy consultants. But I was just wondering, what is the standpoint on involving and including environmental organizations, local organizations, in maybe, training them on how to monitor these processes and sort of take on the role of the public eye to make sure the processes are working as they are designed to work.
A lot for your question. I'm looking into the panel round. I don't know, there's no representative from an NGO on our panel, but I saw that EEI, Katarina, I don't know if you would like to take up this question from the European Environmental Initiative. Or anyone else. I don't want to put anyone on the spotlight, but I just, that caught my eye. And I think also the comment, okay, Ellery, do you have an additional question or would you like to answer on this one?
Well, not an additional question, but I can tell you about the experience we had in trying to use the Basel document from Holland to Ghana, or from Ghana to Holland. It's a matter of opinion, of course. It's been a really difficult process, and I saw that Reggie was also in the call. I've contacted him first. And it's just been a nuisance in general. It's been a really difficult process, and I think what the solution could be is, if we kind of come together with a few of European country or European companies, that we could kind of like force the whole chain. So we can put up a transport chain with a few companies and just make the process good, because I have read almost every document to do the whole Basel thing, and even our own government are not really aware of the Basel document itself, because they have the Transboundary move document. It's exactly the same. It's a few questions are a little bit off, but it's actually exactly the same. So I think it would be wise, that's just my opinion, to have a focus group, just make a chain of transporting and just start with that. First make it right. I see so many different companies that will have done it but not do it right on the right way, and I think if we can all come together and maybe we can do this right, just a proof of concept. That's
Thanks,
my
Ellery,
comment.
for that suggestion. And I think I'm pretty sure that both Prevent as well STEP are happy to take up that suggestion to like create a focus group that will take up the further discussion on also maybe sharing positive examples and implementing, like practically implementing a positive example.
Because I've talked to our own government, and they didn't know about. They knew that the document exists, but they didn't know the right answers to just fill it out. It's just so simple, and it's so ridiculously that you sign something and you don't know anything about it. It's
Yes.
beyond my comprehension, to be honest. But that's my
I don't know
opinion.
if you've already noted down Tatiana's offer, basically, that you can also provide your comments to the Basel PIC, like to improve the Basel PIC procedure. So that was an invitation, I guess, to all those who have had some experience. So please feel free to do so. Reinhard, your hand is up, so I'll hand over to you.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I was just also wanted to say the part that you did, please do share your practical experience. It's very valuable. I also put that in the chat, so we can assist with that if necessary. But I see that there are a number of competent authorities on the call. Specifically, I see Ivory Coast and Nigeria, and I'm wondering from either of them if there's any. If I would ask you, what do you need because we've mentioned capacity that is missing, and clearly also in the Netherlands even. But if the one question would be, what do you need in order to be able to better facilitate these sort of shipments. Could you maybe elaborate a little bit on that? Maybe what is specifically you need and what sort of feedback do you get from people trying to get permits or transboundary movement documents from you, if any of those focal points are still online?
Are you addressing this to me or just in general?
No.
Yeah,
I don't know if you know. If you know on behalf of the Dutch government, that would also be useful. But I also know that there's some African.
Well, I've talked to them a lot, so no, I have no comment on that.
And maybe from the representatives from Ivory Coast or Nigeria, if you're still around on the call. No. We know.
Please feel free to unmute yourself if there's anyone who has or who can share their needs basically in order to better facilitate the implementation of the PIC procedure.
Guess they're not in call anymore.
Okay, we'll try to get some of those comments. Ellen, would you want to share something? You've unmuted yourself.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much for the nice presentation that I've been following Prevent Waste, doing a very great job. So my experience, we are also a recycling company called Zaidi Recyclers in Tanzania. We also developed a platform. It's a digital platform that can help recover most of the recycling materials. And now we have put, of course, electronic waste, batteries, and other type of materials. So we have experience in the industry, and notably we have some companies, of course, who are engaging in waste, collection, mostly electronic waste. But of course, you can't call them a recycling company. Mostly they are dismantling company, recovery from the big institutions, industries, and they dismantle it and take those valuable items and export to European market. And the materials which they cannot be recycled, then they're being left around, even discarded, with no proper disposal. And as I said earlier on the comment, that most of these companies, of course, they're not doing some public awareness. You don't find this drive, and probably could be because of high fee they pay maybe on the permit, because the local permits are very, very expensive, and the procedures are cumbersome, as you are saying. And maybe they're not seeing, they don't see the importance of them, driving, awareness to the public. So I think going forward, we need to, because the e-waste, most of the materials, they are available from, used by the people, So if you can't raise awareness to the public, then you can recover most of the materials. So I think going forward, we need to remove the bureaucracy in terms of local permits, in terms of export, the boundaries movement. We need to remove all these bureaucratic procedures. Maybe our governments, because we are saying it is hazardous waste, then they tend to be more focused on the procedures rather than easing the way to transport these materials to other countries for recycling. And another part, we need to focus more on the awareness. Awareness, I think, is something which is missing, and we need to put it as a key focus. And then the recovery. And recovery, of course, once you remove the charges, high charges of local permit, and then you bring awareness to the public, you need to also put the infrastructure to be able to collect the materials. One of the infrastructure, of course, is digital. Give people the easy way to drop off their, or to call for pickup of their e-waste materials. Again, also, put these drop-off centers where people can now, drop off their materials. So those are my suggestions. And of course, I'm ready to work with people who around here, because our platform can work in many countries in Africa to be able to accelerate, recovery of e-waste materials. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Ellen, for your comment. And I guess that's already the second call for the involvement of NGOs for awareness raising purposes and including the public from this call or session today. Antene, maybe you would like to share what you posted in the chat, your experience from Ethiopia. Otherwise, I can also just briefly read it out. So,
can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, we can hear you now.
Thank you. Thank you all, Prevent and Steve, for this platform. Actually, Ethiopia ratified the Basel Convention and also developed hazardous waste legislation and e-waste regulation in 2018 with the support of different organizations. Also, there was one manufacturing center, the manufacturing center funded by GCEF, but currently it is not functional because after having these legislations and this facility, there was a gap when these supporters step back. So currently we are developing extended producer responsibility for batteries, for both lithium-ion batteries and lead-acid batteries in Ethiopia. But also the government is looking to focus on e-waste issue, because in Ethiopia, e-waste and hazardous waste are managed by different proclamations. So maybe if Prevent or Step, I think we need your strong involvement to implement this policy into action, because it is a new for us. We have a legislation, we have the manufacturing center, but we need the technical guidelines or standards, something like that, to to operate very well. Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you very much. We still have another 5 minutes. If there's any other questions or comments, please feel free to raise your hand or use the chat, or ideally raise your hand, actually. I'm not sure if everybody can see the chat. That's why it's easier to just unmute yourself. Otherwise, I can already start maybe like summarizing a little bit. I think that it was very interesting to see that the Basel Convention is already taking up basically the process of amending the PIC procedure, and again invites all of you to share your experiences. Then there was the proposal to form a focus group and really try to create a best practice scenario, and then share these kind of also positive experiences amongst each other, and also the concrete call basically for support from Ethiopia. So maybe Ethiopia, one of the an import export from Ethiopia could be an example. There was also the question in the chat earlier if the session recording will be shared. Yes, we will share it on the Prevent YouTube channel, and we can also share the link to that to all of you afterwards. And since there's no other urgent questions, as far as I can see, I would hand over to you, Jana, to close the session.
Yes, thank you very much for all your thoughts and inputs. Yeah, so a few words on the way forward. So we would really like to continue the working group and compile more lessons learned. However, in a more sustainable way, as the work done so far by our members was in kind. So we are currently looking for financing options to set up a secretariat, which could accompany some pilots. And yeah, after compiling some more learnings from pilots, we could also imagine organizing another side event at the following or the next Basel Convention COP to bring in this very valuable practical experiences. And finally, we would like to continue discussing with you all relevant international organizations, the Basel Convention Secretariat, and parties to the Basel Convention, on the best approaches to capacity building formats and also options to pilot some ideas. Next slide, please. Yeah, Katja. Yeah, so for this, please get in touch with us. And yeah, thank you very much for attending the session today and for sharing your thoughts.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. I think this is the part we say goodbye.
Yes.
Okay,
Goodbye.
bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.